Okay. Good afternoon. Yeah, it feels like 3:15 on day 3, doesn't it? Day 4, I guess, for some people. Well, I want to congratulate you for making this far. It's quite an achievement, and for actually still showing up to sessions. It's a dubious honor of going on the last day, but I sincerely appreciate you spending some time with us. So next hour or so, we'll talk about a concept that many of you, maybe all of you, maybe some of you have heard about, or I'm sure are all experiencing at one degree or another in your company, this concept of a cloud center of excellence. So I'm John Purcell, VP of Product at CloudHealth by VMware. I've been with the company now coming up on 2 years, responsible for product vision, product strategy, and delivery. I'm just going to set this session up, take about 10 minutes or so, sort of shape and frame the conversation, and then I'm going to invite my guest, David Bernstein from Zendesk, to give you a real-world point of view on this concept. And hopefully we'll have time for some questions, and we'll be able to help out a bit. So just super quick, if you don't know who CloudHealth is, we're the market leader in public cloud cost management and general governance, right? We were founded in 2012 in Boston by Joe Kinsella, our current CTO, and we've spent over the intervening years really dialing in with companies to solving that cost management problem as companies move workloads to the public cloud in particular, although our support spans all the way back through hybrid cloud into the private data center. And of course, if you do know CloudHealth and you are perhaps a customer of CloudHealth, you'll know that back on October 4th, we were actually acquired, or the acquisition closed, by VMware. So we're super excited and an opportunity to really accelerate what turns out to be a very, very aligned vision in terms of what we're trying to achieve and help companies manage in the public cloud. What are we here to talk about today? Well, I thought I would just sort of set this up a little bit by talking about something we refer to as Cloud 2.0. Actually, it's probably Cloud 3.0 or N.0 at this point. But if you just pause for a second, think about how this industry has evolved in the few short years, even since reInvent started back in 2012, right? And you think about the key changes that have happened over the intervening 5 or 6 years or so. Lots of things, transformative change in this industry, as you've all lived through and are actually partly responsible for. You know, you think about cloud in 2012 was really just the purview of tech companies that we now refer to as born in the cloud, right? Roll forward to today, large enterprises, global enterprises, public sector companies, public sector organizations, fully adopting cloud now. The concerns we had 2 or 3 years ago about workload security, access control, we've moved on from those, okay? We used to talk about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. We're coming up the stack, right? We're talking about higher layers now in the stack. From an architecture point of view in 2012, we were talking mostly about client server. Now we're talking about microservices, serverless, right? The world has changed. And we all here in the room, to a large degree, are responsible for driving that change. And we use this picture in the background here to sort of form an analogy, right? If there are any mountain climbers or people at least familiar with the practice, it's quite dangerous, but if you're familiar with the practice, there's this idea of a false peak, right? When you reached what you think is the summit, only to realize that there's another quite a distance to go. And in all of these changes in the market between 2012, we thought we'd hit the peak. We thought we'd hit the peak of IT workload management, security infrastructure, only to realize we hadn't even started. As we sit here in 2018, with all of the services we hear announced every year at this event, the stuff we're working on day to day, right, we can appreciate how we're really just at another false peak. There's a tremendous amount of work left to do to really achieve what it is we're trying to achieve. So what is that? What are we trying to achieve? Well, I would argue, and I'd ask you to consider, that none of us here want or really should be in the business of managing our cloud infrastructure. That's not what we're doing, right? Certainly if you're a cloud consumer, that's really not what you want to do. That's not your core business. What I would argue is that you're adopting public cloud infrastructure, the public cloud as an ecosystem, in order to transform what your actual business is, right? To drive agility, to drive scalability maybe, certainly to drive speed and acceleration, to become more competitive. We want to get out of the business of managing our cloud infrastructure and get back into the business of using our cloud infrastructure to transform the business. That's what I would argue we're trying to do here. So how do we do that? How can we achieve that? How can we help drive through that journey, through that transformation, to that point where the cloud is really enabling us, not sort of, taking our time and attention away from our core strategy? Well, Stephen Orban, if you're not familiar with the name, AWS luminary, been with the company best part of a decade now, I think, certainly 6-7 years. A handful of years ago, he started to write about his experiences and the lessons he was learning from engaging with large enterprises who were starting to adopt public cloud infrastructure. And he should know, because he was CTO of both Bloomberg and before that Dow Jones, as they were starting to adopt public cloud. So he has a lot of experience before he ever arrived at AWS. And once he arrived at AWS, he spent 3 years as the global head of enterprise strategy. So he traveled the world engaging with companies like us, like you, to really understand what was preventing mass adoption of public cloud, what's standing in the way, what were the pains, what's the struggle. Anyway, long story short, he created this 7 steps to public cloud adoption or public cloud maturity. I'll just touch on these sort of super quick. If you start at the bottom left, executive support, what Orban argues, or argued, was that to truly adopt and remove barriers to adopting public cloud, to execute a transformation like that, you need support all the way from the very top of the organization. This can't be grassroots led, right? You need top-down support at all levels of the organization. And the executives need to know that you may have to break some rules or break glass to actually get this done, and so you need that air cover. You need to educate staff also at all levels and in every organization. And not just the forward-leaning members of staff or the forward-thinking, innovative members of staff, but the more institutionalized, maybe sort of comfortable, sort of stable folks on staff that are just very comfortable and know with high confidence how to execute what we have today. Everybody's got to learn how the public cloud can really help. You've got to drive a culture of experiments. The cloud, if it's anything, it's the most crazy and opportunistic experimental playground. We can run whatever we could possibly dream of with all of the services that are available to us on demand whenever we need it. So we've got to be constantly running tests and learning and promoting that culture across the organization. If you're a company that leverages partners to help you manage your IT burden, there are lots of those existing partners and new ones emerging to really help you migrate workloads to the cloud, migrate your infrastructure to the cloud. And if there are workloads that you can't or don't want to move to the cloud, which, let's face it, is a reality for most large enterprises or companies just generally, you can take advantage. You've got to be willing to take advantage of this concept of hybrid architecture. There are plenty of solutions and options for you to span that public-private gap. And if you do these things, and you execute well, and you have alignment, you can arrive at this concept of having a cloud-first policy. Right? So instead of starting with why cloud, you can actually start with, well, why not cloud? Right? But the final piece here is what I want to spend the rest of today's session on, which is this concept of the center of excellence. So let's dig a couple layers deeper on this. What is it? How do you define it? Well, we've talked to hundreds, thousands at this point of companies, and they all have this concept of a team or an organization called different things, right? And you see some of the names on this slide. I learned a new one this morning that I'd actually never heard before, right? Our favorite one on this slide was Cloud Steward. This is what we'd been using to sort of capture the concept of somebody whose job it is to help a company, move towards the public cloud. But I heard, I had a meeting this morning with one of our customers, a large media and entertainment company, and their CTO refers to this role, and you like this, refers to this role as the cloud gangster. Yeah, I thought you might like that. Change your business cards. So lots of different names, right? Lots of different names. But regardless of what we call it, there are a set of sort of interconnected characteristics that I just want to sort of touch on quickly, just to give you a sense of what this is, what this group of people, this team is, right? What it should be. Top left, it's got to be a full-time, right? At least one or more member of the team has to be on this thing full-time. They've got to be dedicated to it, and they've got to be goaled accordingly, right? This cannot be a part-time job. It's too important. If you don't do it this way, managing your cloud will end up being your core business, and that's not what we necessarily want. Cross-functional, another key element, right? We're not just talking technologists necessarily. We're not talking about just development or operations or IT. We're talking about finance. We're possibly even talking about heads of the lines of business or representatives, business strategists, for example, right? It's got to be cross-functional. I guess technology or technologists are not the only people that need to show up on this team or skill sets. Regardless of who they are, what function they come from, the argument is that they've got to have an innovative mindset versus experienced. And to juxtaposition or create these as opposing forces is maybe not the right way to frame this. What we're really talking about is finding a blend between innovative thinking and experienced thinking. I guess the long and the short of it is the people with the most amount of experience in your IT and your workloads are not always the best people to put on this team. We talked about experimentation, but experiment continuously, right? And do it with the best tools. Go find out what the best tools are. Be willing to go test new things, try new things, get ahead of the curve. Most importantly, get ahead of the rest of your organization. That's where you can get some credibility, right? When teams and dev teams and DevOps teams start to hear about and read about and come to shows like this and start wondering, oh, what are these new services? If they have a center of excellence team that's already experimenting with them, it goes a tremendous distance to building credibility. This team has got to be staffed with people who have the ability to observe and listen and really learn quickly. But the flip side of that, and this is crucial, they've got to be teachers. They've got to be capable of sharing knowledge, sharing information, showing people the way, teaching people how to run and execute in the cloud effectively, right? Convince people and show them that there are best practices here. Engagement at all levels, I don't just mean to the executive office. I mean north, south, east, and west across all functions. Right? They've got to be sort of willing and capable of talking different languages, right? Talking the different vernacular of different functions. Right? You've got to be engaged at all levels. And I'll stop with the bottom right, and that's this concept of customer centricity. I don't just mean the people that pay you money, right? I mean acting somewhat like a customer support mindset, right? Because in reality, all of the other functions in the organization that will be putting work in the cloud are really your customers, right? You've got to be helping them to get there, lead them there, show them the best path to that. So this Cloud Center of Excellence, whatever we call it, here are a set of just ideas, characteristics, traits, attributes, interconnected, as you can see, that we would argue, and we see, the successful companies have in place. But to put it into practice and to put a little bit of more meat on this bone, I wanted to invite my guest speaker to the stage today, David Bernstein. He's been a customer of CloudHealth now for a while. A great friend to the company now, pushes us very hard, which we need and we love and we respect. So he's become a great friend to the company, great friend to me, and I'm delighted to have him take it from here. Thanks, David.
Thanks, John. Great. I like that new characterization of what the Center of Excellence people are. But as far as my team knows, we're just production engineering. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Zendesk and sort of set the stage for how this evolved and what our Cloud Center of Excellence looks like and how we got here. Zendesk, some of our stats, we serve a lot of customers. For us, a customer is a business. It might be a mom and pop shop, bakery, or fish and tackle company. It might be quite a large quite a large customer, but we, there's a little bit of stats. We've grown pretty large, about 2,500 employees, and really helping a lot of people with their customer service. We make some products. Here they are, and this is the secret decoder to all the little geometric shapes you find in our branding. And these are, support customer service tools, tickets, and so on and so forth. So this is what we make, and we deliver this as a SaaS solution to a whole bunch of customers, companies, who have put their customers at the center of their business, right? Totally changing their industries. For example, Airbnb, we know, is a complete disruptor by putting their customers in the center. For them, the customers are people who stay at places and people who rent their places. This is a completely different way to think about the hoteling business, for example. So we're really proud of our company customers. And behind the scenes, to accomplish this, here's what our engineering team sort of looks like. We have around 8 development locations. Some cities have seals, some cities have flags, but here they are, and we're real proud of our footprint around the world. We have a lot of engineers. We have a lot of engineering teams, small teams. We have a very rapid deployment pace, and all of these people are operating on AWS, and that's the platform from which we deliver all of our solutions. So this is a pretty interesting problem. These 600 engineers, 60 teams are deploying to AWS locations all around the world, so that's a kind of an added dimension. As you know, regions are all different in terms of what they cost, the capabilities they have, what they're used for. We have certain regions which are more important to us than others, and so on. But it's a pretty big footprint. And so the notion of a cloud center of excellence is something that's really helped us achieve these goals. So I want to talk about our center of excellence approach and share what we've learned, and hopefully that will help you in operating this sort of thing in your company. Why have a cloud center of excellence, right? What is that? How does that fit into the organization? Basically, my customers are, as John mentioned, it's our engineering team, right? In our engineering team, it's a DevOps team. We don't have a separate, really, ops group. We have, all these teams have ops people embedded in with the people who build our software. You made it, you run it. And we drink that Kool-Aid, and that's how it works. But, they need a lot of help because they're small teams, and there's a lot going on with Amazon. I'm sure everybody is feeling that right now, that, wow, there's so many things to keep track of, so much stuff to do. So these teams, they need help with their vendors, like Amazon, like other vendors. They need to get trained. They need to figure out how to design stuff. They need to figure out, best practices around implementation. How much does it cost? Sometimes engineering teams, would rather not think about that. But of course, over time, people want to be smart with how they cause spend to occur. And of course, observability and instrumentation. So these teams, we don't want 60, 70 teams in my case to be reinventing the wheel in every one of these. We want folks to be empowered to go fast in all of these areas. So hence the Cloud Center of Excellence, a small team of busy people who are highly leveraged and really serve all these different functions to help our really as a go-to place. Our engineering teams know, it's something about cloud. I need some help. I'm going to hook up with the Cloud Center of Excellence folks. They're going to help set me in the right direction, right? But it's really, although it's a central place for help, it's kind of a non-centralized central place, right? So that we try to be out there and not tell folks what to do, but help them do what they want to do faster. And so I'll just sketch through a couple of these so you can get an idea of what the actual activities are, right? First, it's vendors. Needless to say, there's AWS. For us, that's a pretty big vendor. but I have 100 other vendors I worry about, folks who provide me with all kinds of interesting other technology. Not only, for example, the technology that I use for my financial engineering, CloudHealth, for example, but also lots of other features that help make our platform go, from database technology, malware technology, email technology, tooling, you name it. All of this goes through sort of, the Cloud Center of Excellence serves that up to our company so that the individual teams don't have to worry about that, right? So we take over these sort of aspects, like the procurement process. We have a procurement department, but we sort of don't want engineers to have to figure out how to buy software. So we help them do that. We help them sort through compliance with our CISO and our security team. We help make sure that all the important vendors, including Amazon, get paid for what we use. We really do joint planning with our teams, like with Amazon. We really do a lot of joint planning as to, what is the right Amazon service to use for this particular new feature we're trying to come up with. For example, give us some help. We interface with the TAM teams, we interface with the SA people, and we help serve them up to the various engineering teams. And of course, we actually do the financial engineering. We look after the costs, we buy the RIs, because we have a view, we're really the only department that has a view of our entire footprint and what that looks like and what that spend is. And for example, a tool like CloudHealth, we couldn't do that without. So interfacing with all of the vendors is an important function of the Cloud Center of Excellence, so the engineering teams don't have to do that. We also help folks with a training. In other words, engineering needs to figure out new stuff. They need to learn about what they need to do. And oftentimes the vendor training programs, take a long time. There's courseware. They just need to get some questions answered. So we'll try to help them get the information they need quickly, bring in Amazon or something to train us up on these things. I'm sort of like, okay, everybody, who's going to reInvent, right? Conferences, we sort of organize, help folks get lined up with certifications, bring in the different product area experts from AWS and have them introduced to the teams and solve problems. We get the AWS folks to come sit in our office and hold office hours. We tell the vendors, like, here's what we need from you for next year, all of that kind of stuff. So the whole notion of really getting the needs and the training done is something that we sort of put together. We also want to serve up best design practices. It's kind of interesting because AWS is such a self-service system, right? And there's so much good documentation and case studies out there that a lot of DevOps teams, especially when you have such a distributed organization, they feel like, okay, I got to figure out how to make this work. Well, guess what? We spend a lot of money with Amazon. We spend a lot of money with Amazon support. So Amazon can help you. Like, they'll show up and do design sessions with you. They'll help you do proof of concepts. They'll go through and assess some technology alternatives with you. They'll figure out, if you build it this way, it's going to cost a fortune. Maybe you should build it that way, right? Help you with your automation. So in other words, all the areas of design, we really help funnel. And so I don't have to know how to design everything, but I can be a matchmaking to help bring in the expert resources to the engineering teams so that they can design the way they need to. And our solution architects, or AWS solution architects, know what everybody's doing so they can help us with some commonality around how we do our data lakes, commonality around how we do big data, commonality around all those sorts of things, what our sort of approach to HA or DR is, for example. Also, implementation. Now, teams come up with a new product or a new feature, or let's say it's a Black Friday or it's Super Bowl, and we're going to get some demand. We have these retailers who, those are really big days. One of our customers are people who make video games. All of you know who they are and use them. You might not know we do the customer service, but when a new game comes out, they get a lot of feedback through their customer service channels. People will be posting sort of as their community board onto our system. So we get tremendous capacity demands when our customers come out with new releases or when there are these sort of events. So we tee up Amazon and we say, hey, this is going to be a big day for us. We have a new release. We have a new feature. One of our customers is doing something big so that we can be prepared for what we need to do to get more capacity when we need it. Amazon likes to tell you they have infinite capacity. They don't. And especially if you're in all those regions and you're using some esoteric instance type, they don't always have all of those ready for you. If you want, tons of M5Ds or i3s or something, you've got to let Amazon know ahead of time so you can grab a couple hundred of those if you need them. So that's something that we work with them. We work with them just like, prepping our limits, making sure that we have all eyes on when something goes live, and really understand that the cost models are starting to work out as the capacity goes up, that we keep eyes on that to say, wow, this is costing more than we thought, or look, it's scaling up great. So that's something that we work with the engineering teams and we work with AWS to do. And of course, we also get to share in the success of every one of the individual teams who launch something new. And so we get involved with a lot of go-live parties. So that's always a good function of the Center of Excellence team. And then, of course, costs, right? Costs are a reality of this business, and you have to make sure that you're spending smartly, right? So that we do go ahead and provide the tool set to the team so they know what it is they're spending. Oftentimes it's kind of hard to figure out, what does my footprint cost? I have a new feature. I'm making a plan for the next couple of quarters as, to what my capacity needs are going to be. That's great, but what is it going to cost? We got to make sure that's in the budget. We got to make sure that our finance people are cool with that. So the whole area around cost management is a super important function of the Center of Excellence, because I do not want finance people talking to all my engineering teams. Engineers don't really like that, and it takes a lot of time, and I'd rather make sure that they're building and running, and that finance is happy. So we spend a lot of time sort of in the middle, and we also we want to catch these overruns as early as we can. And so this insulation of engineers from finance is really important, and the ability to sound the alarm or take evasive action. And if something goes wrong is really important. And of course, we keep our eyes open if we see something that is burning up spend. Then we're kind of like, hey, is there something we can do about that? And folks half the time may not even know. So that's an important function of the Cloud Center of Excellence, to be a good partner with our engineering teams so that they don't have to. They get all the tools they need so that they're empowered with respect to costs, not limited, because we also know that the day that our engineers have to fill out a form to get an EC2, right, that's the day the company goes sideways. So we don't want that to happen. We want to be way ahead of that and make cost awareness something that's a great experience and not a bad one. And finally, instrumentation. Instrumentation, as everybody here knows, is a really important part of a production footprint, right? In terms of how do you do your metrics? How do you do your application performance management? How do you do your logging? How do you do your incident management? And so on and so forth. So these tools generally have to be consistent across our entire production footprint, so we can remediate incidents quickly, and we can share knowledge about how to use them. We can get better insights together, swap notes about how well our stuff's running and how to make it better. And so this is something that we really facilitate, delivering these tool sets to the team so they could use them and create a community around them internally. And of course, this also includes cost efficiency and utilization tooling, so individual engineering teams can understand, like, how well am I doing with my particular footprint in terms of efficiency, because people want to build stuff that that gets a lot of miles per gallon, right? And so so that's what we do. Also, we're a very close ally to the Site Reliability Engineering team, or SRE team, because observability tools, when they're pervasive, are a good thing for the SRE team. So that's a lot of stuff to be in the middle of. And, you can't just sort of stand up and say, hey, I'm going to be the cloud gangster, the cloud center of excellence guy, the cloud shepherd, right? And everybody, listen to me, or, finance, talk to me now. And so how do you get this started? How do you bootstrap this, or how did it happen? And I think this is actually kind of maybe the best takeaway of this, right? Because, sure, you have people who are your internal evangelists. They have great knowledge base. They have great rapport with the different departments. But does the company really look at them? Do the engineering teams really go sort of through this and say, this is a value-added thing for me? This, does finance really how do you get yourself in the middle of this and help accelerate and deliver this to the organization? So bootstrapping a cloud center of excellence. So here's kind of what we discovered about how to get this going in a way is, begin as the engineering team that helps finance. Engineers are happy with that. Okay, you deal with finance. I'm cool with that, right? And finance is oh, we know if we go to that guy, on Monday and then on Tuesday, and we're how's your spend going? How's your spend going on Wednesday, on Thursday, right? That if they go to that team and they can get good data about sort of what finance needs to know, and the cloud model for finance is different, as John has talked about, right? The whole notion of spends are variable, they're hard to predict. The whole notion of how to handle the result of reserved instances and amortization, the need to feed that beast in terms of buying your RI portfolio. These are all pretty tough topics for engineering teams to deal with. So really a great way to bootstrap is to say, hey, I know finance is very interested in spend, right? And so I'm going to help them with visibility and control, right? I'm going to be a really good friend of finance. So what I'm going to do is really try to be in the middle of that. And you start off because what happens is, right, with this variable spend on your cloud platform, it grows in sort of a complex way with scale, right? And these tools grow with a complex way with scale. Generally your observability tools, they're going to cost more the bigger your footprint gets. Your cost management tools are going to cost more the more you spend. Your logging is going to cost more because you're logging more stuff. And so what you sort of do is, I pressed the back button. So what you sort of do is you say, okay, I'm going to first get in front of the finance angle of this and kind of help serve up these tools and help get a good notion of wrestling the dragon a little bit and be a best friend in finance. And then the engineering teams will start to say, hey, am I okay with my budget? And hey, I need to deploy more of this. Am I good? And hey, I really need these core tools. Can you make sure that I can just use them as much as I want, right? If I'm going to deploy a whole bunch of Kubernetes, or if I'm going to deploy a whole bunch of more VMs, right? Am I going to cause a whole bunch of spend? So when you do a favor for the engineering teams on the one side and take that off their plate and serve them up great tools, and you do a favor for the finance team and you take that off their plate and serve them up good data, then suddenly you're kind of in the middle. And that's the way we've sort of figured out how to bootstrap a center of excellence. And once you do that, you then sort of have the position where you can then start helping the engineering teams with everything else. Like hey, you really should go to reInvent, or hey, do you need this training, or did you hear about this new capability that Amazon just came out with, and all the other things I talked about. So if you're looking in your company for a way to kind of get to help establish a cloud center of excellence, I would say focus on these tools right here, because they're kind of going to be your most expensive tools, and they kind of are the most interest to finance, and they're also the most interest to engineering. And then you'll find yourself in the middle with the ability to really help both sides of the equation as quick as possible. So that's how you bootstrap a cloud center of excellence, if that's a good takeaway. And of course, in the end, what is it all about, right? What it's all about is it's really being part of the phenomena where you build this platform. And as we say, what we want to do is we're really not building cloud-based solutions because, it's a cloud-based solution. We're doing it to deliver something to customers, to end customers, so that they can really do something great. And we don't have, most of the company doesn't have to worry about as much about the cloud platform, because the Cloud Center of Excellence is really helping them. And so in the end, of course, what do folks end up seeing? They see great software that's simple and that works really well for them. And so you see wonderful tickets like this, like light switch doesn't work. Have you tried turning it on and off again, right? Yes, it now goes on. So, so all that sausage making behind the scenes, right? And you end up being part of something that is really great for the end user experience. And that's ultimately the satisfaction of why a Cloud Center of Excellence is a great part of the organization to be in, because you can really feel like you've made a great contribution to this sort of thing happening. So with that, perhaps maybe a couple closing words, John, and then we'll take some questions.
Sure. Thanks, David. Hopefully that was helpful for you, the audience. It's very gratifying to know that CloudHealth has spent millions of dollars in years worth of innovation and product development to know that we can help companies do light switch remediation. So yes. That's a really good takeaway. I'll remember we should do a case study on that.
We should.
So the net of it is we're talking about an organization within your organization, a team within your organization, that the characteristics of which we described to you. You heard David talk about how he's been able to bootstrap it within Zendesk. We have the fortune of being able to work with people just like David everywhere we go around the globe. You see some of the sort of capabilities we provide here. I'm not going to go too deep there. You can see us later about that. But these are some of the takeaways, and it's doable if you just set your mind to it and you commit to it and you go start to build the connections that David referred to. So I think we have some time remaining on the schedule. If anybody's got any questions, we'd be happy to take them. There's a couple of mics there if you want to step up. But if you don't, that's totally fine too.
Click one more time. There we go.
How do you guys fund the CCoE? And I guess the follow-up to that is, are you guys taking overhead from your cloud cost to fund the CCoE?
I'm sorry, could you?
How do you fund your Cloud Center of Excellence? Where's the budget come from to pay for these?
Where's the funding coming from? Well, first of all, it's really kind of a small team. So it's not like a giant organization you have to worry about funding. And somebody has to, it's kind of these functions have to get done somewhere, right? And so, the funding is part of production engineering for us. Usually you'll have some people come forward and again, finance, that's why I say the bootstrapping, finance will be very supportive if you help them, right? And so it's a really highly leveraged function. It doesn't really cost that much. It just requires a lot of good energy and good concept, a good concept that your internal customer base, right, you're really helping them. So it's really just kind of a natural occurrence of intermediating between finance and engineering. Generally, if you're doing a good job at that, you'll get funding support in the company because it will make an obvious difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had one question for you. Hi, David. We were met the other day, but I think we have a similar group that we kind of stood up at Vanguard. And but where we are right now is curious about how much are you expecting, like, the stakeholders, your different customers to use some of these tools like CloudHealth and things like that, and getting really smart on, cost at AWS? Or are you kind of keeping that in the center of excellence and saying, we're going to manage it for you. You guys don't have to worry about that as much?
Oh, that's a really great question. So, generally speaking, most of our tooling across the company is available to every single engineer, right? And cost management tooling like CloudHealth is no exception to that. Every engineer has access to that, and in fact, and it's part of their single sign-on, right? And so what we actually do is, the Cloud Center of Excellence, we spend a lot of time with the tagging and the perspectives, as they're called in CloudHealth, and really aligning the spend with the engineering teams so that every one of those teams kind of, we put together a Confluence page, we pre-can the links, so they come in, they know, they click there, boom, they're going to get their costs displayed right there to them with all the stuff under the covers, amortization magic and everything else, all embedded in there so that they see it. And And when you tee it up like that, it's really surprising, right? It's like even just curiosity, like, oh, here's this, at first it's like when we first started rolling this out, it sounded like everybody was pretty curious, like, well, what does my footprint cost, And also, what does his footprint cost or her footprint cost, right? We made it totally open within engineering, so people can start to get a concept about what footprints cost, and then now that we're pushing out to the team's responsibility for what their footprint costs, like, okay, what do you need next year? Wow, that's like, oh, well, how much did I spend last year, right? You have to answer these basic questions, and so we have really wide adoption. I mean, of course, people care because, like, if they want to grow their part of the footprint, they've got to assert the budget they want. And how do they assert the budget they want? They go ahead and they look at what they're currently spending, and we expect them to do their capacity modeling and to ask for the amount that they need themselves. So we're really pushing the empowerment of spend and budget into the hands of the engineers who cause the cost. And if you don't do that culture change, I think, then you're not really going to get it under control.
Yeah, thank you. I think that culture change is where we're trying to go through that right now.
The culture change is super important. Like, put the control in the hands of the people that actually make it happen with tooling enabled. That's the secret ingredient that I think makes this all work.
So to your slide that sort of summarized the company 2007, I guess it started, right? I'm going to assume you were sort of born in the cloud. When did you start your Cloud Center of Excellence? Like when it became a cool term, did you already have one of those? And then you just said, hey, we should really label it and go by these principles? Or were you like 3-4 years into the company and said, wow, we really need to get mature and do this?
Actually, that's a very interesting, so we weren't really born in the cloud.
Okay.
Actually, 2007 probably would have been too early, really, there wasn't really AWS at the time, right? So we went through a number of different co-location and hosting scenarios until we really landed pretty much all in on AWS. And it kind of came out as our journey really seriously. I mean, we started using AWS 4 or 5 years ago or more, but when we really seriously started getting production in AWS over the last few years, and that became our complete platform, it kind of emerged naturally. And it translated a lot from, well, what's that going to cost? There was that question. Well, how do we monitor what that costs? Because it's different from CapEx in data centers, right? So we started getting tooling to try to figure that out, and somebody put their hand up and said, hey, I think we could save some money here, or I'll report on that to finance, and it just sort of emerged that way. And that's the aha about establishing the Center of Excellence in terms of how it grew. And it became an accelerator. So when folks were like, I want to get my stuff running. Well, everybody's going to AWS. I got to get my stuff on there, right? Can you help? Can I get the Amazon guys to help me? They would come to the Center of Excellence, and we would say, here, and we would make the matchmaking to all these teams. And one team after another, caught fire, and we just threw gas on it. And that's kind of how it best happens. So it's really a great accelerator.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. With your bootstrapping that you had there, what would you say would be your recommendation for the next step after you've successfully integrated with finance and you're helping them and they're happy and teams are kind of coming to you for budget advice? What would you do next to help keep growing your CCoE?
Well, finance is never perfectly happy, so that's an ongoing pursuit of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? But there's plenty to do, right? Not only once you start to, and this is a long journey, right? We're still midway in it, or I don't know how percent we're in this journey, but we're never finished. So I think the idea is once you sort of get your costs visible, then people could start really understanding, what individual product lines cost. People can start to understand profitability. We can better understand capacity planning. We can better understand how to better put the company's cash to work with the RI futures. We can We can start to couple in the instrumentation with some of the costs so that we can really understand some efficiency and utilization and optimization. So, that's a journey that happens a little later. If you start with this idea that says we have to save money, we have to optimize, right? That's just a downer, right away. So what you want to do is position it as engineering excellence, right? Like, great, car goes 150 miles an hour, but how many miles per gallon does it get doing that, right? So there's always improvement, and the way you get to that improvement is by providing shining lights on these things, right? And that's why those core things around observability, including your cost management and security and so on, all those elements, that new improvements continue to come out when we enable this. So I don't know. Next year maybe we'll have a version 2 of this presentation, and I'll tell you all the new things we learned as we roll this out. But the great part is the engineering teams, they're like very interested, right? Because cost engineering, that's a new thing that I could be good at, and so I think that's going to come out in a big way.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, I come from a company that's just starting to pilot public cloud services, and we do not have a Cloud Center of Excellence just yet. We would like to start one. I was wondering what parts of a classic organization that's not in public cloud, a classic IT organization, would be ideal to pull from to start this Cloud Center of Excellence.
Yeah, I mean, our experience has been that in this move to cloud, there's this sudden sort of idea that the whole business model for that the cost model for that's sort of a little different. Yeah. And people are a little unknown about it, a little worried about it. Like if you have fixed assets in data centers, or you have applications or stuff that runs on a set of servers and services that you kind of know what that's going to cost, and those cycles are long. As you start to have projects that are going to go into cloud, you're wondering, well, did that end up, you probably did that move not really to save money, but to get agility and start getting new services and so on. Well, how did that work out, right? So how do you answer that question? Like, what did it cost? Or what are the tools I can point to that thing to make sure I understand what's going on there? And so somebody will say, like, hey, there's some cool tools out there that we should get to answer that question. And I would suggest trying to do that in engineering, right? Because it's a curiosity thing. Like, I moved this little bit of footprint into the cloud, and I really got to find out, how is that going? Did I pick the right machine types? Is there enough capacity there? Yeah. Do I need to increase that? Yeah. What will that cost if I switch from a 4XL to an 8XL? All these is my cost really just going to double, or is it going to go up even more? Yeah. All those. So you start answering those questions. Suddenly, then the next project and the next project, you point your tool to that. You point your tool to that. You point your tool to that. Bingo! You're the center of excellence, dude. And that's kind of how it emerged. So I would.
So it starts with one person, basically, and it kind of evolves from there. What additional team members say I'm the cloud guy within my company?
Well,
and I want to start this team, this small team, maybe a maximum of 3 to 5 people, to do this. What parts of the organization would be?
That would be a big center of excellence team, probably. I think you will find some internal evangelists and as I said, it seems to me that putting yourself sort of a little bit in between finance and engineering, yeah, and being in it, our Cloud Center of Excellence is part of engineering. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, hey, everybody, let's, somebody interfaces with Amazon, right? And somebody understands, has to look at what it costs and like that. And that's, grab onto that. Even if the finance gets the Amazon spend, they're going to come to somebody in engineering and say, WTF, is this right? Or what is this? I mean, they're hard to understand. So you sort of need tools to answer those questions. So you're going to want something like a CloudHealth to make some sense of what your first foray in the cloud is. Make sure it's going okay. And it's a way for you to say, look, this is working, calm down. We've got we got eyes on this, right? And then that will nucleate and emerge into your center of excellence, is what happened with us.
So start with the tool and then
Start with the
people-
2 or 3 core tools
Yeah.
that the folks in engineering, your metrics tool, your logging tools, your APM tools. When you move to cloud, you've got to make sure that those tools are there
Right.
for the cloud footprint. So sort of help make that happen, and then it'll grow from there.
Okay, great.
As soon as you get that first bill with the unexpected spike in it, that's when you'll find out who needs to be on your center of excellence.
Don't run from that, run to that.
Run
Put
to
your
it.
hand up and
Run
say,
to it.
I'm going to look into that and figure this out.
Somebody's
Then you're the
getting
guy
action.
from then on. Maybe keep going that way?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right. So, actually, I'm your neighbor in Madison, so American Family Insurance.
Oh, good. Madison rocks, yeah.
So, the way you've approached this sounds to be very different than how we've approached it, and much more organic. So, I have some questions because I want to make sure I understand so that I'm not misunderstanding how you're using the terminology. So, start with engineering. When you say engineering, you mean application developers? Who are you talking about?
Well, we have a large engineering team that makes our product, soup to nuts.
Are they DevOps structured? So you have security, you have operations people, you have infrastructure engineers. Are you using that model, or are you doing something else?
No, we use that model, and we've refined the model where we've realized that the best thing to do is to put those functions all together in DevOps fashion so that, the team that builds the thing over here, chat, and the thing that builds talk, and the thing that builds guide, and those are our, and sometimes there's definitely a handful of teams in each, right? That each one of those teams of, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 people, right? There's people in there who are smart about security. There's people in there who are smart about ops. There's people in there who are building the application functionality themselves, and that's their team.
So are they permanently assigned? Do they to support the product from development all the way through the life cycle? And do they all share the same common job role? Or do they have different roles, but they participate in some sort of an organized group?
Well, they have different areas of focus, and they have different roles, if you will, right? I mean, there's the people who are spending more time building application functionality, and there's the people who are spending more time doing the deployment automation for it, right? But generally, they're a team. They're the team that's responsible for making sure that, chat works. And they're all there. But this is exactly wherein the problem lies, because they can't be experts in, you don't want them deciding what tooling to use for metrics or APM. You don't want them deciding, to have to figure out how to get a vendor. You don't want them looking through all the details of dealing with AWS, figuring out all this stuff. You want them to sort of have a resource they go to and says, like, how can I get this done? Like, can you hook me up with training? Can you make sure I got some tooling to look at this cost? Can you make sure? So we try to front for them.
Sure, I can't agree more, but we went the opposite way. We've established, I own cloud engineering throughout the entire organization. My cloud engineers are distributed to the teams. And so I maintain standards by 2 ways. First of all, we have COPs, so we share information organically, and then the Center of Excellence establishes best practices and, in certain cases, standards where we have concerns about security or other protocols. But we've structured it from that way out, and then the teams, as they build themselves autonomously, they have different roles that participate. And to some extent, over time, we're looking at people sharing roles. But there's not a lot of that because the expertise that exists, most developers don't know anything about infrastructure. And
Right.
An awful lot of people don't know anything about security, and there's not a lot of that to go around. And then we're using the community of practice to do organic sharing, but the Center of Excellence to enforce standards where it's appropriate because people struggle with optimization of new database technology or something. So
Right.
that's why I'm curious, because you kind of went organically up. We kind of we built all that structure and then went the other way.
There was a very zigzag road to get here, and we, over time we emerged from sort of some separate ops into integrated DevOps, and we, make no mistake, we still have a CISO, and we have an organization that really worries about all the compliance stuff, and we have a separate security team, but the concept of security, security is part of engineering. The so-called well-architected parts, that we push as much into the engineering teams as individually as we can. But
Do you also have the COPs too, or are you just using the Center of Excellence?
do we have a what?
Communities of practice. Do you have those established also or not?
Yeah, we do. We also have some architecture teams and a process for people to say, I want to do something here. And then there's sort of a group that helps, document and create some standards so that this team that, has kind of gone through that road, maybe done the first serverless implementation in our company, and they've figured out how to work with the various groups in the company to sort of get everybody happy about that, then we put that in a place so that the next team that's going to say, hey, I want to do this serverless thing, these people went down that road, you should reuse all their stuff that they did. So but we try to, as I said, we try to make it a centralized, non-centralized, and we find that by throwing gas on the fire as opposed to, constraint and firm-handed guide, firm-handedness. That's sort of. Certainly we tell people like, no, you can't. Please don't pick some other random cloud provider just out of the blue. Like, we do give some guardrails, but generally speaking, yes, we think that the way to scale is to get as much energy out close to the development and the operations as possible.
One last question. Out of your 600 engineers, how many of them are engaged in DevOps teams versus more traditional organizational structures?
Oh, I really don't have I really don't even have a number.
30%?
I really don't have a number. There's more people building app stuff than doing ops stuff, but I couldn't really give you a firm percentage number. Right?
I think maybe I didn't phrase the question. Is your entire organization practicing DevOps, so all engineering groups are functioning that way, or is there a blend?
All.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah. Yep. We went and made the big change, and it's working. It's working good. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question, maybe two, if we can make them quick, before the light goes red.
Yeah, appreciate it. Hey, so I was just kind of curious and you touched on some of it, and even just there in that answer, what sort of tools, processes, even products your Cloud Center of Excellence develops or offers to the enterprise? So, are you working on well-architected reviews, kind of pre-prod and in production? Are you doing any sort of reference architecture and kind of developing best practices, cloud formation scripts, and stuff like that?
That's a great question. So in our model, our Cloud Center of Excellence, we kind of help procure commercial tools, but in terms of, and we interface with Amazon as that people want to do well-architected for maybe new products or when they've changed an architecture or whatnot. Like, we help do the matchmaking, but the teams do it. But we have other common shared services, foundation teams, stuff like that. So within engineering, there are people who worry about our database stuff as kind of a team, right? They're not all just applications developers. So that team worries about, and then we have a team that worries about, our data lakes and big data, and our team that worries about ML. And those are served up into multiple different applications. So we have a number of foundational teams and we have some teams that concentrate on some things like common shared services, including best practices in automation. And so those, for me, they're just other engineering teams. They happen to serve some of the other engineering teams as well. But for me, they're just, more additional teams. So our Cloud Center of Excellence, we don't actually build anything, right? We just serve up the tools, be the clearinghouse for good information, and, try to hand out all the swag we get at reInvent. Which is sort of a good analogy of what we do, right? Try to.
Gotcha.
And as a result, there is some variability. For example, some folks are a little Terraform over there. Some people are a little CloudFormation over here. Some people, so that's okay, right? It's not super strict, but we try to keep everybody so that everybody knows, and we all march in the same direction generally, and that way we can go fast.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. It says I have 30 seconds left, so maybe there's one more.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a quick question. Is your CCOE responsible for provisioning accounts, new Amazon accounts for teams?
I'm sorry, it's got a bad echo.
Sorry, is your CCOE responsible for creating Amazon accounts for teams if they ask for new accounts and for laying down like
Accounts, yeah.
security?
So we, how you partition the different engineering teams and where they deploy into and how you keep track of that, I think is a subject of a lot of discussion. We choose not to have a lot of accounts, and we choose to use things like tagging as to how we identify where things go, right? All the accounts roll up into a consolidated billing so we can centrally understand and deal with RIs and total spend visibility. But as far as I'm concerned, it's almost like we have one big account. I mean, we have a bunch of accounts, but the way we chose to operate, we don't have these hard boundaries between accounts because we found that just causes a lot of difficulty with respect to IAM and between account sharing and VPC provisioning and all of that, right? So the one other little tidbit on that is that we find that no matter how well engineering really does identify all the resources with tagging and other things, like it's not perfect. And so CloudHealth gives us a way to layer on how we look at kind of an asset management system that doesn't really count on tagging or engineering or accounts being perfect.
Gotcha.
And finance likes that. They like it that we have a view of that without counting on an engineer going sideways with tagging.
Okay, thank you.
I think the light's flashing here, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And, see you at the party.